Hello, and welcome to episode 3 of a shallow dive into energy systems. When we take a look at energy systems, first we have to define it, and this is basically how our body uses and produces energy. When we take a look at the different pathways of producing energy, it can be through our ATP, PC system, otherwise known as our phosphagen system. It could be through our glycolytic pathways, or through our oxidative pathways. This is an image we've all probably seen before, either in a textbook, on Instagram, or just on the internet in general, where it shows at different points of exercise where each system kicks in and how much percentage of energy it gives towards exercise. A couple key points about these systems though, they're always at work. We never just turn on or turn off a system because our systems actually use other byproducts to drive that system. Now these systems can be trained. There's a reason why sprinters usually sprint in practice and why long distance runners usually run long distances to help them improve in their sport. Now there's no differences between a male and a female energy system, or rather how our body produces that energy to be used for exercise. When we take a little bit deeper look into that phosphagen system, this system doesn't use oxygen. When we look at 5 key characteristics within the system, how this energy is produced, the duration of the system, what the system is best used for, its possible limitations, then how energy is reproduced at the end. So energy is usually produced through phosphocreatine or ADP, which we'll get into further. The system only lasts for about 10 to 30 seconds at most. It's best used for sprinting exercises, weightlifting, or anything that's going to be plyometrics and really short in duration. The type of exercise associated with this and the type of athlete, the exercise is usually short in duration and highly intense, and the athlete is usually explosive, quick, or what we call bouncy. This athlete probably has the highest percentage of fat-free mass and is usually a pretty technically sound athlete. The limitations of this pathway is the ATP source, or how much ATP you have available. It is regenerated through our ATP PCR system, but this does take about 3 to 4 minutes. Before we just dive right into the entire pathway, there are some things we need to look at. We need to look at the molecules involved, the location of this, the process name actually involved, and any enzymes that may up production of ATP. Our main molecules involved in this, ATP, ADP, and creatine phosphate. The location happens in the cytoplasm of the cell, and the entire process is actually called ATP phosphorylation. This process happens outside the mitochondria, but the enzymes involved are ATPase and creatine kinase, which we'll take a look into now. First thing we need to look at is physical activity. This physical activity is to help increase the production or actually the use of ATP. This ATP goes through ATPase, where it releases a phosphate and forms an ADP, or adenosine diphosphate. This now released phosphate, with also creatine and the help of creatine kinase as an enzyme, forms a creatine phosphate. This creatine phosphate with adenosine diphosphate helps form adenosine triphosphate. So this is a complete cycle of how we form ATP. Another way to look at this, with the help of ATPase, we release that phosphate. That phosphate goes back to the top, or the beginning of the list. With the help of creatine kinase, we form a creatine phosphate. The creatine phosphate, in combination with adenosine diphosphate and the enzyme creatine kinase again, helps form that ATP, or the energy used. For now, we're going to skip that glycolytic system and we're going to go right to our oxidative system. This is it allows us to see the biggest differences between a system that uses oxygen and between a system that uses no oxygen to produce ATP. We're going to look at the same 5 factors to see how it differs between our ATP system and then eventually our glycolytic system. Energy is usually produced with oxygen, and it comes from carbs, fats, or proteins. If you want more information on metabolism of these macronutrients, check out one of my other videos. The duration, anything greater than 3 minutes, and it's best used for marathons, triathlons, or medium distance running. Limitations is oxygen delivery, but this is more from a peripheral central fatigue model. Regeneration is through aerobic glycolysis. However, there are other factors that play a role in this regeneration process. When we take a look at the type of exercise and the type of athlete associated with our oxidative system, the exercise is usually endurance, and it's usually done at a low intensity. The athlete who usually performs the best, especially in our oxidative system, they're usually really efficient with their movement, and they usually have a low percentage of fat-free mass. When we take a look at the molecules, locations, and processes, there's a lot of molecules that play a role in regenerating ATP for long endurance events. This happens across an entire range of locations, not just one part of our bodies or cells. There's multiple processes that happen in order to create ATP. Now when we take a look at these processes, some of them happen outside the mitochondria and some of them happen inside the mitochondria. We all kind of know the mitochondria as the powerhouse of the cell, and we'll kind of further explain why this is. Starting with glycolysis that happens in our cytoplasm, the main goal of glycolysis is to take glucose and convert it into pyruvate. Pyruvate is then converted to acetyl-CoA, so it can be used in our Krebs cycle. Now, as the name implies, there's a cycle involved with acetyl-CoA where that molecule is broken down to form other molecules. Now, during this cycle, carbon dioxide and water are released, but most importantly, we have these electron transports, NADs, and FADs that are used in our electron transport chain. Now, looking at our electron transport chain, this is where NADs and FADs play a major role, especially when it comes to ATP production in the oxidative system. As they pass through a complex, they force hydrogen ions into that inner membrane while releasing electrons. Every time this happens, they go through a different complex. When we take a little bit further look down this chain, we can see after complex 4, we have a bigger molecule called ATP synthase. As the name implies, this is where ATP is going to be produced. Now, as electrons are released from NADs and FADs in combination with extra hydrogen ions on the mitochondrial side with oxygen actually help form water. Now, those hydrogen ions that are on our inner membrane get pumped back through that ATP synthase, and the phosphate and adenosine diphosphate that we have actually form adenosine triphosphate because of that hydrogen being pumped out of the inner membrane into the mitochondria. Now, going back to our glycolytic system, like our ATP PCR system, this system does also not use oxygen. When we look at it where the energy is produced from, it's produced through lactate and through the carbs that are available within our muscles. The duration of this energy system is about 30 seconds to 3 minutes, and it's best used for boxing, interval training, or short to medium distance running. It's limited by its available ATP source, or the carbs available in the muscle, and ATP is regenerated through anaerobic glycolysis, but like ATP, this takes about 3 to 4 minutes. When we take a look at the exercise involved in the glycolytic pathway, or even the athlete who does well in this pathway, the exercise is that muscle burn or lactic acid buildup. It is done at a moderate intensity when we look at the other energy systems, but in fact, it may feel like it's high intensity. The athlete, it's within a range. If we look at medium distance runners and boxers, we see many different body types. They still have relatively a high percentage of fat-free mass when compared to that oxidative athlete, but less when compared to that short duration ATP dominant system athlete. When we look at the molecules, the location, and the processes, molecules, glucose, pyruvate, which we already have introduced, and a new one, lactate. Locations of where this energy is produced in our cytoplasm and our liver. We have 3 different processes. We have glycolysis, our Cori cycle, and something called lactate fermentation. Now, we've already seen how glycolysis works, taking glucose and converting it into pyruvate with those electron transports, NADs, and FADs. However, one thing that happens, especially with not enough oxygen during exercise, we take that pyruvate, we take it through lactate fermentation, and we actually form lactate. Now, this lactate goes through something called our Cori cycle, where we take lactate to the liver to help us produce glucose. This glucose helps go through glycolysis to help form more energy. In conclusion, our body can function without the use of oxygen, but it's not ideal and it doesn't last for a long time. These systems, like I said before, they can be trained. To train a certain system, we want to stay within the time range in order to get the best result. When we look at examples of where people maybe go wrong, 400-meter repeat sprints with a 1-minute rest does not train that ATP PCR system. Running marathons doesn't mean you necessarily run 100 meters faster. And lifting heavy weights does not mean you're going to become efficient at running. However, because you trained that ATP PCR system, you may develop good athletic abilities to help you with jumping. Now, if you're just looking for some general fitness, it's a good idea to train across all 3 systems. Now, finally, it takes time for aerobic glycolysis to ramp up ATP production. That's why our 2 systems give us about 3 minutes of immediate energy. And most importantly, we need to remember that these systems actually never turn off and they're always working. I hope you enjoyed episode 3 of a shallow dive into energy systems.